Okay, pleased to see you again in the second session. In this class, I'll demonstrate the short project on your research, legal research. Suppose if you are now required to research the issue of same-sex marriage, yeah? And you also specifically asked to discuss federal agencies and 3 federal agencies and 3 federal regulations which would be responsible to deal with the same-sex marriage issue. Then your path to respond with this research assignment will perhaps be on LexisNexis, so we would consider the topic by displaying some research operation on LexisNexis. Well, actually, you know, in down my popular website, often workable to record second sources, so I simply type the same word with same-sex marriage in this Korean version, and then you will have some recent news stories or some personal writings, which is informative in some cases and also very structured in the tone and the message. Cafe, and also other public sources which entails the issue of a same-sex marriage, and it also provides a encyclopedia that could be on Korean Wikipedia, and also could be linked to the Wikipedia, Britannica, and other version of encyclopedia. And the issue would be actually primitive. It often stems from discrete and insulate minority. Would be a not cultural, and of course nor customary, since we often concluded in heterosex marriage. So it is perhaps in some sense against the nature of humanity, what is say. And the same-sex marriage has often been denied religiously from Catholicism, so could be outlawed as a matter of conduct beliefs and religion from the Western society generally. We would be a traditionalist and conservative. It involves such important social cultural consequence and kind of actually some discrete issue, but would raise public concern involving not only social but also political and also economic and In this research, you would explore the legal aspect about legalization of same-sex marriage. How do you see the past stories of presidential election, gay rights, and same-sex marriage between Republicanism and Democrats? So it is one political issue nationally, which is dissident among groups. Recently, Pope Francisco has declared some flexible response with same-sex marriage. The Catholicism has not endorsed as a matter of basic policy, which would not grant the religious charter or endorsement. They deny it's actually against the God shape and kind of so it is interesting. In the United States, same-sex marriage has been charted in trace and history. It is legally recognized by a majority of U.S. states and by the United States federal government, 29 states, the District of Columbia, and 10 Native American tribal jurisdictions have legalized same-sex marriage. In addition, Idaho is scheduled to legalize same-sex marriage when a court order takes effect on October 15th. So the marriage issue would be civil, prevalently in the legal context. So often dealt by competence of a state jurisdiction. So civil criminal matters fall within the state sovereignty or state of competence of state government, and they'll provide the basic form of marriage code or case rules. But actually, the movement to obtain civil marriage rights and benefits for same-sex couples in the United States began in the 1970s, but became increasingly prominent in U.S. politics from the 1993 Hawaii Supreme Court decision in Baja versus Ruin that declared the state prohibition to be unconstitutional. The Massachusetts perhaps became the first U.S. state and the sixth jurisdiction in the world to legalize same-sex marriage, following the Supreme Judicial Court decision in Goodrich versus Department of Public Health 6 months earlier. On May 9th, 2012, Barack Obama became the first sitting U.S. president to publicly declare support for the legalization of same-sex marriage. Before this event, we would have kind of influence from Defense Marriage, what we call DOMA in abbreviation. It was enacted in 1996, and I bring you focus to Section 2 of DOMA and Section 3. Section 2 says that no state need recognize the legal validity of same-sex relationship, even if recognized as marriage by another state. It purports to relieve a state of its reciprocal obligation to honor the laws of other states as required by the Constitution's full faith and credit clause. So the recognition, legal recognition of marriage would be made by state, and we have a constitutional provision about full faith and credit clause. It would facilitate the judgment of articles and the public finding, governmental finding, which also includes such as a marriage, recognition of marriage. So this would perhaps be one issue contended in the federal court. It generally lacks the quality of federal interest since it is civil and deals with marriage. Nonetheless, this clause would be one to be embroiled, I suppose, and equal protection clause would often be challenged to claim the constitutional rights. Why do you discriminate between normal couples, what is normal, and same-sex marriage? And DOMA Section 3 define marriage for the purpose of federal law as a union of one man and one woman. So, according to this section, same-sex marriage could not be recognized by the federal government when they apply the federal laws. This brings a serious detriment about many laws in the United States. Statutes and regulations could be received in a different understanding if the same-sex marriage would be granted as a matter of constitution by the United States and others. Consider if the federal law could have any definite say about same-sex marriage. That would not be plausible in the federalism of the United States. However, by way of a constitutional review from the federal constitution, the state law about same-sex marriage, kind of ban or other alternatives to deal with that question could be denied in some cases and endorsed by the federal court in other cases. For example, on July 8, 2010, Judge Joseph Darrow of District Court of Massachusetts held that the denial of federal rights and benefits to lawfully married Massachusetts same-sex couple is unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. Beginning in 2010, 8 federal courts found DOMA Section 3 unconstitutional on issues including bankruptcy, public employee benefits, estate taxes, and immigration. On October 8, 2012, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals became the first court to hold sexual orientation to be a quasi-suspect classification and applied intermediate scrutiny to strike down Section 3 of DOMA as unconstitutional in Windsor v. United States. So, the quasi-suspect classification normally leads to little heightened scrutiny. Yeah? So the level of scrutiny will be stern, and suspect classification would be the best in that scheme, which requires a compelling state interest or any other inviolable cause by the government. You also consider some differences from the governmental measure. So equal protection clause would rely on the concept among 3 tiers of review, and often it is normal to apply a balancing test, which is lower in standard, and intermediate scrutiny would be taught, but less than strict scrutiny. required of a suspect classification. Race would be one important category, bringing in the suspect classification to be exercised. Age, foreign aliens, other categories could have some cases about level of scrutiny. Have some mind to confirm later. And in the progress, you have some interesting events. For example, civil same-sex marriage ceremony being performed in San Francisco City Hall in June 2008. People seeking court order recognition of the same-sex marriage based on their specific circumstances have had varying degrees of success. So the consequence could not be expected in any definite way. For example, some states recognize same-sex marriage from other jurisdictions for a specific purpose. Ohio for death certificates, Wyoming for obtaining divorce. It will disclose some details of legal treatment, and the Seventh Circuit and U.S. District Court have each required Indiana to recognize a marriage where one plaintiff is terminally ill. U.S. District Courts in Arizona and Florida have each required a state to recognize a same-sex marriage for the purpose of issuing or amending a death certificate. So the challenge would not be comprehensive or neither general. So the art of success would depend on the specifics of case. In some cases, it involves the issue of death certificate, and in other cases, birth certificates and veterans' pension benefit for the dead spouse. So how do you find the legal spouse in granting the beneficiary status? And importantly, in this year, on October 6, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear appeals in all the cases it had been asked to consider from appellate courts in the 4th, 7th, and 10th circuits, allowing decisions from those courts striking down marriage bans to stand. The states with bans at issue in those cases were Indiana, Oklahoma, Utah, Virginia, and Wisconsin. The court's action has led to legal same-sex marriage in Colorado, North Carolina, and West Virginia. It is also expected to affect other states within the 3 circuits, Wyoming, Kansas, and South Carolina. A decision the next day by the 9th Circuit invalidating bans on same-sex marriage in Indiana, Idaho, and Nevada has now affected Alaska, and is expected to also affect Arizona and now Montana. So the issue is controversial, and the issue could not be resolved completely, since the general approach would often be not granted. However, the recent U.S. Supreme Court allows us to actually some favor on legalization of same-sex marriages. The court would deny the socially, which means the issue would be less federal in quality. So, and in other ways, perhaps practically, some kind of implicit endorsement about state bans. Endorsement about lower court judgment, which struck down the legal same-sex marriage. So, in general tones of U.S. government, as evinced in the presidential proclamation and the response of a U.S. Supreme Court and many other lower court judgments, would generally favor the legalization of same-sex marriage. So let us proceed to work on our class scheme. Oops. So I prepared in advance. This requires a trouble pass to read this. So search by content type, and we once again click Federal Statute and Regulations. So how do you find three federal agencies who are responsible to address the same-sex marriage issue? Keywords are important all the way through the research purpose, so we type same-sex marriage. Then you see what actually 10,000 results, and it could be classified depending on sources by category. So we have what a dominant share of legislation, statute and codes, resistance, and regulatory codes, constitutions, rules, public laws. Let us enter regulatory laws. So you will see many federal regulations, and also shows the department or agencies in concern and perhaps in jurisdiction of that issue. Department of Veterans, Office of Personnel Management, Office of Personnel Regulations relating to labor, Social Security Administration, Office of Personnel Management, let us enter one. So CFR means Code of Federal Regulation. So it actually is most effective search website. So you may use search engine to reach this portal. Spouse and surviving spouse would be one element in this statute, and provided 3.5. Spouse means a person of the opposite sex whose marriage to the veteran meets the requirements. Surviving spouse, except as provided in 3.0.5.2. Surviving spouse means a person of the opposite sex whose marriage to the veteran meets the requirements. Blah, blah, blah. So it is consistent with the federal statute I've introduced earlier, a DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act. So opposite sex is prerequisite to leading to a effective valid marriage legally. How do you consider this could be overturned by presidential proclamations? How do you weigh the hierarchy of law? The federal Congress had not any say about same-sex marriage, and we now have a code, federal regulations, and it could be directed by presidential proclamations. It is a law generally notwithstanding the presidential proclamations. How do you reconcile the conflict of terms and direction? Let's get back to the previous scene. Then you will have another consider the important provision about responsibility to execute laws. The president would be responsible to administer uniformly and based on general universal standard nationwide. So should be directed according to the presidential proclamation. The key term search would come short, for example, education. This document has been retrieved in, but I'm not sure this would serve. Just it involves the kind of crimes, arson, campus crimes, aggravated assault, burglary, sex offenses, forcible. So the key term, you see the word in red that would indicate to correspond with your word in what including keywords. Oh, marriage. We have marriage. Sorry, non-forcible sexual intercourse between persons who are related to each other within the degrees wherein marriage is prohibited by law. This is one of sex offenses: statutory rape, larceny, theft. Also, so this code would be irrelevant. Nonetheless, could come into a catch. So be considerate. How about this? You see, the remaining it provides provision which command to constitute the governing board or public health service, Department of Health and Human Services. The governing board of center must meet the following requirements. Size: the board must consist of at least 9, but not more than 25 members, except that this provision may be waived by the Secretary of Good Cause, by the Secretary for good cause shown. And how is about without keyword. No member of the board shall be an employee of center, or spouse or child, parent, brother or sister by blood or marriage of such an employee. So it is one limitation in organizing the governing board. So operating migrant health centers, and it would be funded with grants from Department of Health and Human Services, and the code will require to organize governing board. And, some limitations, blood marriage. How do you consider this limitation in terms of same-sex marriage? Let's get back to previous thing again. Pension pronunciation veteran related. So it is similar, and we have provision and definitions. Marriage means and what I like bring your attention is that the LexisNexis actually provides an extended legal sources. You now see a definition of marriage. Marriage means a marriage valid under the law of the place where the parties resided at the time of marriage, or the law place where the parties resided when the right to benefits accrued. And beyond this definition, you will find many cases involving the issue of marriage definition. So actually, you now see many red words. So we can complement the case laws with Code of Federal Regulation. So it would be a straightforward way and may engage broad line of ideas which practically matters in court proceeding. So please exercise your study focus about this kind of scheme, or actually available in LexisNexis website. That is a point we now emphasize. So how do you see other federal agencies which concerns of same-sex marriage? For example, Internal Revenue Service would administer the kind of taxing authority into context of statute and constitutions, and may involve the finding of account to impose tax. Then spouse account might be considered, since taxing system has been intricate to avoid a multiplicity of a taxation or double excess taxation. And in other sense, the tax authority also need to make it distinct to deter fraud or prevent any illegal reporting orders, so they may need to find the marriage is as one element to determine the account holders. There will be one ramifications about the effect of presidential proclamations. Let us see a national defense, or what, a parliament defense, employee benefit security, and immigration office also would be important federal agency which need to be alert with a legal marriage, and of course the concern of same-sex marriage in the context. The kind of concern would also arise in the personal affairs. The pension system would be stretched in the same ambit into what it will virtually same with veterans, perhaps. I'm not sure. That will be the way the Korean government has scheme in administering pension plan. We now explore its extensive reform. How do they persuade the resistance? And actually, and immigration office, so the spouse or findings of legal marriage would also highly pertain to the enforcement of laws and statutes. So the kind of agencies would come into our consideration. We now take a moment to review the presidential proclamations. It will be short, and then I'll close this lecture. How do you know the word LGBT, gay marriage? This is the way to read. LGBT stands for what? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. So a cultural way of marriage. Yes. It requires a consumption of time. So, lesbian, gay, bisexual, do you find this out? Oh. Still show to satisfy our purpose. Alright. Perhaps. Oh, sorry. We did not restrict our scope of search. We must first click the federal statute and regulations. So, gay right. How do you see in regulatory codes? So you must game. Sorry for many occasions of failure. Not gay right. So this plainly proves how important the keyword it is wordless. Let us correct it. So we are now successful to retrieve presidential claim. So the citation would be 78 FR 33957 presidential documents from President of the United States proclamation, which was made May 31, 2003. It pertains to Title 3. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Pride Month trained by President of the United States of America. So, what for? It may be represented in initials by LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. It would be shortened in this way. For more than 2 centuries, our nation has struggled to transform the ideas of liberty and equality from founding promise into lasting reality. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans and their aliens have been hard at work on the next great chapter of that history. From the patrons of stonewalling who sparked the movement to service members who can finally be honest about who they love, to brave young people who come out and speak out everything. This year we celebrate LGBT Pride Month at a moment of great hope and progress recognizing the more needs to be done. The support for LGBT equality is growing, led by generation to understand. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., injustice is a threat to justice everywhere. And voters in multiple states support marriage equality. Same-sex couples. State and local governments have taken important steps to provide much-needed protections for transgender Americans. We have witnessed real and lasting change for our work in our country. I continue to support a fully inclusive employment non-discrimination act. So it is purely detrimental to the economic interests of same-sex couples. So should not be discriminated in an unreasonable way, and must be absolute in consideration of past wrongs, as well as respect for marriage. My administration continues to implement the Affordable Care. It's beginning. So in this way, the President's office would lead the public opinion and also direct other peer branches, Congress and others, congressional messages. Typically the proclamations would pertain to the federal agencies, which is in scope, and also diversified about subject issues. Okay, this could impact comprehensively and generally to direct the policy orientation into right path. So hereby proclaim lesbian, gay, bisexual Pride Month. Do you consider it conclusive on legal effect in administering many of statutes? Of course, for your further review, so practice this way of explanation, which must be better than my skills. Okay, that will be all, and we'll meet in the next class. Thank you for your attention, and I apologize for unexpected troubles. Okay, see you in the next class.